My name is Ethan. I'm 28, work in graphic design, and up until 6 months ago, I would have said my life was perfectly normal. I had a few good friends, a well-paying job, and a tidy apartment in a quiet part of town. Things were easygoing, uncomplicated. Then, I met Mara. Man, I remember the first time I saw her. It was at this trendy bar downtown. I was casually scanning the bar when my eye caught her gorgeous face. She had this look about her. Long black hair, deep dark eyes that practically swallowed the light. Her skin was so pale it was a stark contrast to her dark features. She was alone, stirring her drink slowly with one finger. I don't know why I was drawn to her, but it was like she knew I'd come over. She barely looked up when I said hello, just smiled and murmured, "I've been waiting." We started dating. Right from the start, she was intense. She wanted to know everything about me, where I was, who I was with, what I was doing. She'd text me 100 times a day, sometimes just to ask what I was thinking at that exact moment. It seemed odd, sure, but I figured it was just part of her charm. Mara was consuming. Being with her felt like standing in the middle of a storm, thrilling and terrifying, but impossible to leave. Things started to feel off a few weeks in. Mara was possessive, borderline obsessed. She'd show up at my apartment without warning, her pale face framed by the dark night outside my door, her eyes shining with some unreadable intensity. One night, while we were watching a movie, I mentioned Monica, my best friend from high school. I said something casual, something I wouldn't have thought twice about if it weren't for the way Mara reacted. "Monica?" she asked, her voice quiet. Her eyes flicked toward me, sharp, predatory. "Yeah," I said, feeling a weird, creeping tension. "She's just a friend. We've known each other since grade school. Practically family, you know?" Mara didn't respond. She just watched me. After a moment, she reached over, took my hand in hers, and held it so tight that I felt my bones shift. I tried to pull back, but her grip was like iron. I managed to laugh it off, but something inside me had shifted. The next day, I had just arrived home from the gym to find Mara walking out of my front door. When she saw me approaching, there was this look that came over her face, a look like she had just been caught doing something. That look quickly disappeared, replaced by a look of confidence. She told me she came by to see me and found my door was unlocked. Did I forget to lock my door before I left? It was possible. Her eyes studied me to gauge if I believed her or not. It was strange, but I decided not to make a big deal out of it. She accompanied me inside, and we had some dinner, and she spent the night. I started noticing small, strange things after that. Shadows in my apartment that didn't make sense. Things disappearing and reappearing in a bizarre spot. Cold drafts that seemed to follow me even when the windows were closed and the heat turned up. It would only be cold where I immediately was in the apartment, nowhere else. And always I'd feel this prickling sensation at the back of my neck, like someone was standing behind me, watching, breathing down my spine. It felt like I had an invisible voyeur clinging to me. Mara would also seem to know what I was doing all the time. She would ask me questions about things she couldn't know anything about, because she wasn't present when it happened. Like when I tripped getting out of the shower, bruising my arm when I fell. When she saw my arm later on, she made a comment that 70% of household accidents happen in the bathroom. I had my buddy who works in surveillance sweep my place and my car for hidden cameras and listening devices. Nothing. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I called her over and told her we needed to talk. She showed up at my door, smiling, her black eyes gleaming as if she'd already guessed why I'd called her. "You're breaking up with me," she said softly. It wasn't a question. Her voice was calm, too calm. It's too much, Mara," I said, trying to keep my tone steady. "You're intense. It's like you're always here, even when you're not. I can't I need some air." She stared at me, her face as still as a mask. And then she leaned in, close enough that I could smell her perfume, lavender and something darker, almost like ash. Her lips barely moved as she whispered, "Every choice has its consequences, Ethan." And then she left. No yelling, no tears. Just a calm, eerie exit, her dark silhouette slipping out of my apartment. That night, I woke up to a whisper. It was right in my ear, soft but sharp as glass, and it hissed a single word. "Mine." My eyes flew open. The room was dark, but I could have sworn. I felt something there. A presence like Mara was standing just out of sight, breathing, watching. I reached over and flicked on the light. Nothing. Just the quiet hum of my clock, the faint creaks of the old apartment. I didn't sleep much after that. Over the next few days, things escalated. The feeling of being watched grew stronger, like a shadow that clung to me wherever I went. I'd look over my shoulder on the street and catch a glimpse of dark hair vanishing around a corner. At night, I'd hear faint scratching noises at my door like nails scraping wood. I'd open it, heart pounding, but there'd be no one there. Only the faint, lingering scent of lavender and ash. I called Monica. She'd been my friend for years, someone I trusted more than anyone. She came over, listened to everything, her face slowly shifting from concern to something close to fear. "Ethan, are you sure you're not just imagining it?" she asked, her voice cautious. I shook my head. "I don't know, Monica, but it's like she's still here. I feel her, and I keep hearing her voice." Monica stayed with me that night. We both camped out on the couches in the living room. I tried to relax, tried to convince myself that maybe it was all in my head, that Mara had just gotten to me. But then, around 3 a.m, we both heard it. A soft, dragging sound outside my window. Monica and I froze, our eyes meeting in the dim light. She looked terrified, her hand gripping mine so tightly it hurt. Slowly, I stood up, heart hammering, and moved to the window. There, just beyond the glass, was Mara. Her face was pale, almost ghostly in the streetlight, her eyes two black, endless voids. Her lips were twisted into a smile, dark and cruel. "You think you can just leave me, Ethan?" she whispered, her voice barely audible through the glass. "You are mine. You will always belong to me, one way or another." 3 loud knocks rattled my front door. Monica and I both shot our eyes over to the noise. When we looked back to where Mara was standing outside the window, she was gone, without a trace, like she had never been there. The next day, I tried to convince myself it had been a dream, a trick of the mind. But Monica knew it had been real. She didn't say it out loud, but I saw it in her eyes. The same fear, the same crawling unease. She stayed close, said she'd help me figure this out. But I could see her nervous glances, the way she looked over her shoulder like something was creeping up behind her. Mara's presence only grew stronger. I'd wake up with bruises on my arms, deep and purple, shaped like fingers. The lights in my apartment would flicker, casting strange shadows that seemed to move, to shift, to reach for me. One night, Monica and I were sitting on the couch, going over every possible explanation, every rational answer. I'd lost track of time, and by the time we looked up, it was past midnight. That's when we heard the door creak. It swung open slowly, and there, standing in the dark hallway, was Mara. Her eyes were blacker than ever, her mouth stretched in a twisted smile that barely looked human. She took a step forward, her voice low and dripping with malice. "You tried to leave me, Ethan, but you don't leave someone like me." She raised her hand, and the room went ice cold. I felt it, this suffocating weight pressing down, filling my lungs with something thick and suffocating. Monica let out a choked scream, clutching her throat, gasping for air. "Please, stop," I managed to rasp, barely able to force out the words. My throat felt crushed, each breath thick and painful. I fell to my knees, desperate, helpless. What do you want?" Mara tilted her head, a slow, calculating motion, and a smile spread across her face. There was no pity in it, no mercy, only the glittering promise of malice. "You," she murmured, her voice smooth and dark, "to suffer and die in agony." It was the finality in her voice that did it. Something snapped inside me, an anger I'd buried deep, an instinct to fight that clawed its way to the surface. I pushed to my feet, every muscle tight with fury, and threw myself at her, shoving her back with all the strength I could muster. She stumbled, her eyes widening with genuine surprise, as she fell with a heavy thud, sliding across the floor toward the open front door. For a moment, she stayed there, glaring up at me, her eyes alive with hatred and something darker, something I could only describe as inhuman. Then, as I watched, she sprung to her feet. Not like a person, but like an animal, something unhinged and wrong. She hissed, and before I could even react, she shot out of the door, her footsteps fading into the dark hallway. The moment she was gone, it felt like a weight had been lifted. The pressure in the room vanished, the air warming to something bearable again. I took a shaky breath and stumbled back, feeling Monica's hand on my shoulder. We looked at each other in silence, both of us still trembling. "What the hell was that?" she finally asked, breaking the silence. I shook my head, still dazed. "I don't know, Monica. I don't know how any of this is possible." She took a deep breath, steadied herself, and nodded toward the door. "We need to leave," she said. "Come stay at my place until we figure this out." I didn't hesitate. I went to my bedroom to pack a bag, and when I opened the closet, reaching for my old overnight bag in the back, something small and black fell out, hitting the floor with a soft thud. I leaned down to pick it up, squinting at the strange object in the dim light. It was small and made of some rough fabric, sewn tight and knotted with red twine. My skin prickled at the sight of it. It felt wrong. "Monica," I called, motioning her in. When she saw it, her face went white. "Ethan, don't touch that," she said, her voice a choked whisper. She glanced around the room, her eyes wide with something close to horror. "It's a hex bag," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I read about these once. They're curses, Ethan. They hold things inside them. Dark things." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Mara had been in my apartment. She'd been everywhere. There could be more of them. We tore the apartment apart, top to bottom, searching every corner, every crevice. And one by one, we found them. 13 small, black bags, hidden like secrets throughout the place. There was one in the refrigerator, another taped under the coffee table. We found them in my pillowcases, stuffed into the couch cushions, tucked beneath the bathroom sink. We even found 2 in my car, one buried in the trunk and the other taped under the driver's seat. By the time we finished, we were both shaken, the silence between us thick with disbelief and fear. I couldn't even look at my apartment the same way. It felt tainted, polluted by something unseeable but poisonous. The next day, we did our research. Everything we found about hex bags said that touching them was dangerous, that the curses inside could cling to you like a disease. Wearing gloves and using only our left hands as some articles advised, we gathered them all up into an old burlap sack. Then we drove miles out of town to a river confluence, the place where 2 rivers joined. With shaking hands, I threw the bag into the dark water, watching as it was swallowed by the current, pulled down into the depths. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept without nightmares. I didn't go back to my apartment. Monica offered her place and I accepted, too scared to even set foot in that cursed building again. Over the next month, I put in notice and started looking for a fresh start. Eventually, I found a new job a few states away and decided it was time to get out of town for good. I packed up, moved, and told myself that I'd left Mara behind for good. Monica and I still talk, and every time we do, the conversation drifts back to that night. The hex bags, the shadows, the way Mara's eyes had looked at me, so full of fury and hunger. It's been months now, and nothing strange has happened since I left. No shadows, no whispers, no cold drafts lurking in the corners of my new place. But sometimes, in the quiet hours of the night, my mind comes back to Mara's evil intent. I half expect to hear that familiar whisper, her voice as cold as death, sliding through the dark, uttering one simple word: mine. I might be hundreds of miles away in a place Mara could never find me, but I know she isn't finished. Not until her wicked goal has been achieved. For me to suffer and die in agony